Hi, in this video I want to talk about microbiome recovery patterns. And the reason I want to talk about it is that most people tend to have a naive or simplistic view of how recovery from microbiome dysfunction will happen. Um, and to understand better how it will happen and what to expect, and the fact that it is generally a slow process and requires a fair amount of work to make a good recovery. I want to go through the details and explain the whys. So basically, I'm going to give an introduction to it, describe what most people naively tend to assume will happen, and then look at the fact that the microbiome has feedback or um, cycles to it and tends to often work like a pendulum, goes back and forth, and that going back and forth is often where people don't understand. They think it is a very simple, straight fix. And then last thing is dealing with suggestions. Okay, everybody's hope is to renormalize the microbiome. Make it normal. You're out of whack. You want to correct it. Okay. So that journey is a very easy to understand. We want to inhibit or encourage bacteria, and we want to do it by a variety of the diverse means, and the end result would be a balanced microbiome. What means do we use? Well, we could use antibiotics, prescription drugs, supplements, diet changes, vitamins, probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, tons and tons of things. Some of the things include regular exercising. Other things include living in an atmosphere free of pollution or free of chemicals in the house. All those impacts the microbiome. So we want to correct that. For example, one thing I have in my database, which I often get surprised to look at, is the chemical commonly called Roundup. And it is known to cause microbiome shifts. So hence, if you use Roundup around the house, it could be contributing to having an abnormal microbiome. Or almost any insecticide, fungicide, etc., all will have microbiome impact, similar with microplastic in foods. It just goes on endlessly. Some of which may be good, some of it may be bad, but if you're trying to re-normalize it, whatever normal means, probably happy, not having any particular problems or issues would be a reasonable interpretation. Then we have to go in and see, first of all, what could be denormalizing it, and if it's identifiable substance, remove it or reduce it. And in some cases, we want to add things to encourage things because we're trying to inhibit or encourage bacteria, so it can go either way. So the naive hope is take this lecture and all will be right. Very easy, very much a influencer added. This approach actually works for a small group of very specific conditions, for example, TB, chlamydia, etc., where the goal is to Clostridium difficile. The goal is to eliminate a specific bacteria, not to rebalance bacteria, to eliminate one bacteria. And basically, it's a scorched earth. We are going to kill every single bit of this bacteria by whatever means we want to do it, usually by antibiotics. May have side effects, but those side effects, those friendly fire deaths in the microbiome, are of no consequence over the victory of eliminating this enemy. So when we're looking at trying to rebalance the microbiome, we are not looking at scorched earth. It's a totally different paradigm. Our goal is to rehabilitate a population of bacteria to put it into balance. That is, in terms of, let's say, the common economy, is trying to go for full employment and ideally have it so that there are no particular problems in society. Everything in society going along well. People get education, people get health care, people get employment, old people who are disabled taken care of, etc. That is a well rehabilitated country. And what you're trying to do is rehabilitate a population of bacteria, which often has more different bacteria, more bacteria in it than most countries, and more different types than ethnic divisions in any country. And again, it comes back to how we go and do that. We want to reduce overproduction of some bacteria and increase underproduction of other bacteria. So where does that go? Well, first thing is it's not bacteria. It is not bacteria at all. It's metabolites. It's the chemicals which are being produced or consumed by the bacteria. In other words, it's not whether or not you have people in your society. It depends on if those people in society are fed, fit, trained, educated, etc. That makes a good, healthy economy. And they are appropriately trained and educated and have the appropriate skills for what their society needs. Same thing with metabolites. These are chemicals which are produced or consumed by bacteria. Um, Too much of one will cause overgrowth, and too little of one will cause undergrowth for some bacteria. Not all of them. Think of it again in terms of the economy, where we have too many people coming out of university with art history degree. We need some people with art history, but if we have too much, we have a problem. Or not enough people coming out with the skills from high school with the skills to hammer in the nails straight. We got to get a balance across all of these things. One thing is each bacteria requires very many different metabolites. On the left, you see a lovely diagram showing all the chemicals, so you may recognize some of them, and you see how things go from one chemical to the next one. You can see fructose there, glucose there, and you can see that we have a big map of things. And the map actually may be a map showing what happens inside one single bacteria of one particular type. In other words, welcome to the world of complexity. So, key thing to remember is each bacteria requires many different metabolites, both consuming and produce them. So it's not a simple, naive one-on-one. And when we try to adjust metabolites to feed one bacteria, we could inadvertently cause a blooming of a different bacteria. And that's because every bacteria acts slightly different depending on the level of metabolites around it. The best analogy is what we are doing is we're playing whack-a-mole in your microbiome. In other words, we're going in there, we're making things, we're hitting a mole in the pop, and it's gone, and now two more pops out elsewhere. And now we have to hit those, and it goes back and forth. Ideally, we will not have this go on endlessly or get out of control. But it's basically whack-a-mole is a good analogy for what we're trying to do. To illustrate this, here is a Lactobacillus paragaceae. On the left is a partial, keyword partial list of all the pathways which are involved in it. These are being shown and demonstrated by science. In other words, we have a we have a good list of things here, and more importantly, every bacteria is the same. And these pathways are the flow of these chemicals, the metabolites in and out of the bacteria. And so that is it. Okay, that's nice. Let's just work from there. But then you have to stop and say, oh, wait a minute. This behavior is not static. This behavior is a living organism. It adapts. Like, for example, you have a friendly dog who comes up wagging the tail, and nice. You go and you give a few whacks on the head, and it won't come up wagging its tail. It will change its behavior. You may be able to get back to old behavior. You may not be able to. But so the bacteria, literally, you need to do to have more intelligence or more behaviorism than taking a nut and a bolt and putting them together. It is not that simple. So often the behavior is not static. For example, if some bacteria, if there's not enough a particular metabolite there, but there are enough of other chemicals, it will go from consuming the cis metabolite to producing it instead. In other words, it basically tries to buffer the whole body around it to keep a constant level. So if it's a surplus, it consumes it. If it's a deficiency, it produces it and does it by different pathways. Other things is if there's sufficient cis metabolite, instead of responding to it, it just goes to sleep. So, oh, okay, I'm not going to worry about it anymore. Sometimes the phrase quorum sensing will be used, which is if there's a certain amount of quorum of certain metabolites or certain types of bacteria, then its behavior changes. And with too much of some metabolites, it may actually go from reducing something to consuming it. So it will consume it to produce other metabolites, etc. All of this is very dynamic and changes. Now we get one more degree of painful complexity to it. If it's just a virus involved or even sharing with other bacteria. Bacteria do interconnect with each other and they do share SNP. So you may end up with a pure lactobacillus gassy, but because it's in the presence of a different bacteria, some of that bacteria may get shared with it, and the paragassy behavior may change slightly or greatly as a result. So in other words, we have very little absolutely static behavior prediction. We do have probable behavior, and probability and other things tends to be where my skill set is, and we simply have to accept it and work with it as best as we can. The analogy I keep thinking about using is think of the microbiome as an economy. Changes to the economy, like for example, making university free, may cause cascades. Making university free may mean a whole bunch of university graduates, which is sweet, but the side effect is you don't have people going in for the trades. You don't have plumbers, you don't have electricians, you don't have builders, because everybody's opting for the free university, which they perceive to be different, and that causes the economy suddenly to have problems, as in housing shortage, because there's not enough people to build houses. You have lots of people who have high-paying jobs who can afford the houses, but you do not have the houses being built because there's nobody in the economy with those skills. Some may have little impact, like for example, a school meal lunch program may have a little impact initially, but over time it may have significant impact. It will probably cause improved school performance. Others may have major unintended impact. For example, I've reached a note bringing in tariffs on imports that may cause major unintended impact, or that bringing in tariffs may cause secondary impact. For example, ticking off Canadians and Europeans, so nobody comes as visitors to the U.S. anymore, which means suddenly you have hotels which are effectively empty because nobody wants to book a room. So we have to view the microbiome as an economy. It has all the challenges of it and none of the simplicity. There's no magical fix. It's a journey through a purely mapped wilderness, which is a nice way of describing it. You sort of say, okay, here, there, oh, it looks like I can go through this mountain pass. It looks like there's a mountain pass there, and you head off, and then you discover, oh, whoops, need to go back and try again. Suggestions are computed to nudge the microbiome, to shift it in the right direction, in the hopes that things will get better. It's not intended to fix the microbiome, no. It's intended to nudge the microbiome, and in time, the belief is the microbiome will self-heal itself. It will return to its historical stability or a acceptable stability, and all your worst symptoms will have disappeared or become tolerable, or yeah. The amount of nudge is not predictable. There are no better solution. What microbiome prescription tries to do is calculate the most probable one, and using a variety of algorithms to compute probability. Whether or not vitamin A is better than vitamin B or vitamin C, we don't know. What we can do is vitamin C, maybe we may compute as being more probable to help than vitamin A. Doesn't mean it's better, it just means it's more probable. So in general, we have iterative suggestions are needed, and the pattern is pretty simple. We need to test, get the results. 16S tests are acceptable. Shotgun tests are better. Ideally, shotgun test with availability of reference data is the sweetest situation, and it's available on 1 or 2 sites, but not enough sites, unfortunately. What you do is you get and you try suggestions for somewhere between 4 and 12 weeks, whether or not you do it. If you see major changes, you may want to do a retest faster, mainly because seeing the rapid changes implies that the microbiome has changed, and which mean you may want to do a new adjustments. 12 weeks, if you don't see any significant change, then you just hold off and then see where things have gone over time, and then retest and repeat the process. It's an iterative process. It's not straightforward. Do once and you are cured. If you go into remission or acceptable state, then basically what you do is increase the time between tests to prevent a relapse. The microbiome will shift over time, will evolve over time. What you want to do is keep an eye on it to prevent it from going bad again, because once it goes bad, it's a much longer process. If it's some things are going a little bit off, either you notice a few minor symptoms or you're not quite sure something is off, get a retest, take a look at it, make an adjustment. You want to keep trying to nudge the microbiome, your economy, to be healthy and strong. You don't want to ignore the microbiome, just like a good politician will not ignore the economy. So that's basically you. Contact information is there if you have additional comments or questions. And thank you for listening to me. Bye then.